I'm Alyssa Borelli, Senior Editor for Commercial Integrator. Today I'm delighted to have Aaron Leiker from Haivision for a conversation about the command and controller market, one of the fastest moving corners of our industry right now. The discussion is part of Commercial Integrator and Security Sales and Integrations Command and Control Deep Dive Report, featured in our September-October print edition and spotlighted online throughout those months. Aaron brings more than a decade of industry experience to the table and is going to walk us through where these rooms are headed and what integrators need to know. Welcome, Aaron. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Alyssa.
Let's start with the centerpiece of almost every command center, the video wall. These rooms are managing more live video than ever, and the wall has always drawn the most attention. But how has its role actually changed? And once you get past the display itself, what does situational awareness really mean in a modern operations center?
The wall, it's definitely the most conspicuous component, and it plays a very large role, more than just a situational awareness tool. It can also be a showcasing tool for some operation centers as well. But its role's changed a lot. It used to be a very static tool. In the earliest days, it was just replacing map boards and more static tools with, generally speaking, fairly staged set of tools as content needs. Now this is definitely my response is somewhat industry specific. Some are not as dynamic in their needs, in their content needs, as others. But what we've seen over the last, let's say 10 years is where maybe access to 10, 12 computers was sufficient. It's no longer sufficient now. It's 10 to 12 computers, but it might also be 10 to 12 computers in another country, for kind of a follow the sun type operation center. It might be IP video, it might be virtual machines, it might be any number of other sources. So the tool set that's behind that display has had to get much more sophisticated in its ability to go grab content where the user needs it. And sometimes that means it's not a physical source. Sometimes it is a website, it is a virtual machine, it is an IP video source somewhere. So like that level of the dynamic ability for it to go grab this content wherever it may be, really ideally as close to the content generation as possible. And I'm using content as kind of the generic form for these situational awareness assets. It's several things playing together. It's building standards-based tools, because if you have a wide array of these assets that don't follow any level of standard, it's very difficult to ensure quality access to those. Generally, speaking, manufacturers like Haivision and others, we're trying to follow along with these standards, or even possibly, help create the standards that matter in these spaces. Make sure the video wall can showcase properly whatever the users need, right? And whenever they need it. Ideally, it doesn't involve some reconfiguration or recabling to get access to that content.
Let's talk about everything sitting behind that wall. These rooms are definitely more connected than they've ever been. They're pulling dozens of different systems together. How should integrators think about interoperability and secure visualization at the same time so that everything communicates cleanly without opening the door to any cybersecurity risk?
Yeah, there's definitely a opposing forces on the convenience of standards-based and being able to get anything anywhere and being secure. So you have to do that responsibly. If you want access to, let's say, these standard-based content that are possibly on the IT network, you have to treat those sorts of integrations appropriately. You can't hide behind the idea that this is an isolated environment. That doesn't work in this case. But what you get a lot of benefit from being a part of this IP video standards-based content that's out there on the network is you get instant access to it, as long as it's been set up properly. But you need to make sure that the manufacturer you're working with has a hardened security posture that works with the client's security posture. And I think that's a big difference that's between different manufacturers. Some choose to kind of implement their own security mechanism, and that's great when that fits, but you're building a product and you're trying to fit the customer to it. Whereas I know at Haivision, we're trying to, with Command 360 in particular, we try to build in the right mechanisms for the product to mold into the security environment that the customer has established as their level of security, whatever that barrier may be. That barrier is different, and folks care about different things. There's no one, even though there's guidelines out there. NIST, the RMF is probably the one most followed guideline, at least here in North America. But there's no set rule necessarily. Different organizations in different industries they've determined their own security standards, and what we're trying to do, at least with Command 360, is fall in line with that wherever that may be, and that allows that product to operate both securely but also have access to the content where they want it.
So cybersecurity really does touch every decision nowadays.
Yeah, you really can't have one without the other. With the level of responsibility that these operations centers have, it comes with its risks and challenges as well. These are going to be the sites that bad actors want access to most.
More organizations are running across multiple facilities instead of one central room. So what does that move toward distributed operations demand from command center technology, and where do teams tend to run into the most problems?
Well, you've got a couple challenges there. One, your design plays a major factor, right? So, IP video is not all created equal. Some are very big data signals, right? It's a lot of information that maybe doesn't play well on your traditional IT infrastructure, which I would, say is like your 1 gig infrastructure. And then you've got products like Command 360, which tries to stay inside that 1 gig limitation so that it can be integrated into more places more readily without having to ask IT departments to either change infrastructure or reconfigure infrastructure to make it work. Now that's a design choice. I'm not going to say one is right or wrong, but if your intended goal is to hit distributed teams, you really don't have many choices anymore. You kind of have to go within those limitations, because if you're having to send information, let's say over the internet to get to one place, whether it be through a VPN or however it gets there, that bandwidth, that pipe gets very small in some locations, and if you haven't designed with that in mind, and we do a number of things. One, we stay within those limits. That's just part of the design philosophy, at least with the products that are designed to integrate together over, whether it be different buildings or different buildings in different continents. We keep to that limit. And then we also will add additional technologies like, the way we do compression, where, we might only ship video when the screen changes, or we might only send video when that particular situational asset is on the video, has to be on the video wall. We're not just sending it for no reason when no one's looking. So those are just some of the design choices you have. And if you are optimizing around like a follow the sun model and things like that, where you need a lot of content, a lot of the same situational assets in lots of places, but possibly whether they're fed from one central location or 2 locations, using kind of your standards-based IP video is really the only way you can do it, without replicating infrastructure all over the place, and having very strict rules within the operations center workflow to keep things looking at the same data set, which is not really possible. You're going to have some drift in those workflows from one place to the next if you don't. So we've done our product's been integrated into a number of follow the sun models, whether it be maybe the primary operations center might be here in North America, then one in Europe, and then one in the Asia Pacific area. It's very 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 common, and they're able to do that when you're using kind of those standards based IP video, for instance. SRT is kind of the protocol that we primarily champion in our product, and it allows that content to be securely sent to all those locations in a very low latency way, and it's very reliable even when you have imperfect network conditions.
So much of this often comes back to the people in the room, and technology gets a lot of attention, but the operators are actually the ones who determine whether a command center succeeds. So when you design around them, what would you say matters most for keeping them focused and reducing fatigue during long hours? And in your view, what separates a good command center from a great one?
Yeah. Um, Optimizing around the human factors of a space would probably be the answer to both those questions. It's not necessarily something our product goes into specifically, but just making sure the space plan is organized properly, where there's good ingress and egress flow. If there are groups inside the room that need to work together more closely, obviously where you locate those workstations is very important. Lighting is very important in these spaces. It's not necessarily, I mean, we've all seen the movies and it's always these really dark command centers, but those are actually not very fun places to work. It's the contrast is in many ways too much, and people will get fatigued just by being in there. There are a lot of integrators out there and guides to kind of help navigate people to how to set up human-centric lighting, proper space plans, proper desking. A lot of workstation console manufacturers have a lot of design services around that. But that plays a huge role in that fatigue. I think the other thing is just proper calibration. When you get to the video wall and your displays, again, there are standards for this. For instance, in the Avixa content and also these kind of control room design groups are well aware of how bright you should calibrate your displays versus the displays at your desk, how they're angled. Are you doing a lot of head movements? Those are all huge factors. And I think once you get to the technology, I think most importantly, what helps there is it's got to be reliable. I mean, if you don't trust the tool, it's going to be frustrating. The frustration is going to turn into fatigue, and it being relatively easy to use. I don't think nearly enough manufacturers really spend enough time there. There's a lot of feature first, but UI second kind of products out there, and that's great. But if it's difficult to get to, it's either not going to get used, or it will create that frustration. It'll create the friction in that operations center by not being able to be accessed and intelligently and easily by almost anyone who uses it.
Let's close with a topic everyone's asking about, AI. And so there's plenty of hype. And so I wanted to get practical about it. So where do you see AI creating real operational value? And looking ahead, what capabilities should organizations be planning for 5 years out that aren't thinking about it yet?
Yeah, AI, it's such a broad tool. I think its operational value in operations center is going to be very dependent on what you're doing. AI models can be trained, but it's still very, very early. I mean, you might still get, false detection on things like firearms and whether that car was red or going a certain direction. There's still a lot in development, and depending on your specific needs, I think that it could be a next year thing. It could be many years from now, and there's really no good way to know. I think we're thinking it will solve more problems early is things like provisioning these systems. That's something you can train an AI to do quite well. And, for a commercial integrator, I think that's particularly important, maybe not for the end user yet, although everyone appreciates something that goes up faster and smoother. So that's a big thing. And then also how you support systems, I think is going to be another area. And my philosophy is right now with AI is to hold back on letting AI make decisions on content. I think that's ultimately where everyone wants it to go, but I think it's so early on. It's going to right now it would likely feed you a lot of false information, which would create it would create a negative situational awareness situation. But things like provisioning and support, it can do a great job at. And as those tools get better and more refined, I think eventually you'll see it actually play roles, and it is already in certain aspects. I mean, we work with um, some agencies on the West Coast as it relates to fire prevention and and detection, and they use AI quite well, but it's a limited set of information that it's really trying to look at, and that it's great at that. But when the information set gets more complex, like telemetry and other stuff, then it's just not ready there yet. But it'll ultimately get there, and I think its role will be if you think about like what it will enable us to do is, instead of us like focusing the video wall and the operators deciding what is important, it can look at everything, and reshape what the video wall looks like is kind of where we think it'll go, and it'll basically be prioritizing the content that matters based on whatever parameters it's been trained. But I think we're a ways away from that level of proficiency.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just appreciate being on. Always like talking to this community. We focus a lot on making sure that our integrator community is well served with our product. It's been a big focus on our roadmap, because our general philosophy is, if we make their lives better in terms of deploying this product and products like it, and integrate more with products that they use for other things, ultimately the end user benefits as well.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining me, and thanks again for sharing your perspective.
And thank you very much.
And to everyone watching, you can find the full Command and Control Deep Dive report, along with more thought leadership content from the industry's leading manufacturers at commercialintegrator.com. Thanks for watching.